We have some breaking news from the Supreme Court. Bloomberg Law reports that the court accidentally posted a document on its website related to its Idaho abortion decision. Now, it's important. We do not know whether it's a draft, the actual decision, or neither, but it appears to show the justices are poised to allow abortions in medical emergencies in Idaho. But again, the court has not yet rendered its decision officially. NBC's Yamiche Alcindor is reporting on this for us. I'm also joined by Paul Butler and legal professor Mary Ziegler. Yamiche, what more do we know?
Well, Chris, you said it. We are still sort of waiting to see exactly what's going to happen with this decision officially. But Bloomberg Law is reporting that the U.S. Supreme Court is poised to allow abortions in medical emergencies in Idaho. Of course, this was a big case that we were watching. This is, of course, according to a copy of the opinion that was posted briefly on the court's website. Now, that being said, NBC News reached out to the Supreme Court. We were told that a decision has not yet been rendered by the court. It was obtained by Bloomberg Law, which said it was temporarily posted in error by the court. We do not know if this is a draft decision, the actual decision, or neither. NBC was also told the court's publications unit inadvertently and briefly uploaded a document to the court's website. That opinion, though, they were told has not been issued, and it will be issued in due course. So the Supreme Court is telling us there will be an issue in due course. That said, Bloomberg is reporting the decision would reinstate a lower court order that had ensured hospitals in the state could perform emergency abortions to protect the health of the mother. That's the big difference, because the issue here had been whether or not Idaho's law here was in contradiction to federal law. Idaho's law allows exceptions for rape, incest, and the life of the mother, but the health of the mother, meaning whether or not she was going to be very sick, whether or not she might lose her future fertility, whether or not she might have to undergo a surgery where she might have a hysterectomy and not be able to have other children if she was denied an emergency abortion. So in this case, according to Bloomberg, they're saying that the Supreme Court is siding with the Biden administration, though we are still waiting to see what the official ruling will be. But this is a big case that we have been watching and waiting for. A number of women, of course, in Idaho, especially looking to see whether or not they're going to be able to have access to that emergency care, because the Biden administration is saying right now there are women who might go into an emergency room, need an emergency abortion because they are dealing with complications of pregnancy, and might be denied that because of this near total ban on abortion in Idaho. Chris?
All right, Paul, how monumental would this be? And I wonder what you make of what seems to be an accidental posting here of what exactly we're not 100% sure.
And so mistakes happen, during the Dobbs litigation. That opinion was posted early, or at least it was released early, and it turned out to be pretty exact. So I think then there was a question about whether politics had something to do with that case. With that decision being made available by that leak. Here, this does seem more like an error, although at the Supreme Court level, it's still weird that this could happen. But on the merits, at the oral argument, the Supreme Court was focused on the supremacy clause. There's of the Constitution, there's this doctrine called preemption. That means if a federal law and state law conflict, that it's the federal law that prevails. So that may have been the basis if this is actually the decision. Chris, the stakes are really high here. The Solicitor General at oral argument arguing on behalf of women who might need this service emphasized that it's patients who were being harmed. Women who face serious pregnancy complications were being sent home from Idaho hospitals, were being transferred out of the state, and even providers of medical services to pregnant women were leaving the state. So this is a big deal, and it will be an important advance for women's rights if the court decides this case in the way that it's been reported.
I think, Mary, that this is the first time we would have seen this kind of action on a state abortion ban from the U.S. Supreme Court. What do you make of this move?
I think we have to be cautious about overreading it. What was posted on the website by Bloomberg was essentially the court dismissing the case as improvidently granted, meaning we're not going to rule on the merits. We're not going to say if women in Idaho have a right to access these procedures under EMTALA. We're not going to talk about preemption. We're not going to talk about any of it. We're just going to say we shouldn't have intervened this early in the litigation, and the litigation will continue in the lower court. So this is not, I don't think, if the Bloomberg story turns out to be accurate, not a big win for reproductive rights. It's simply kicking the can down the road, which is what we saw with an abortion case earlier this term, where the court said no standing, so people can come back and raise the same claims down the road. Here, this very same litigation will continue in the lower courts if this is in fact the ruling the court is going to reach. So we just simply don't know, and we won't know until after the election how the court is going to rule. I think everybody else is absolutely correct that the stakes are huge for patients, not just in Idaho, but across the country. Patients with wanted pregnancies who are being denied access to life and health-preserving care. But we simply can't say, based on the court's order, if this is what they're ultimately going to hold, that the court is going to preserve that access. All we know, if this is what the court is going to say, which again, might not be, right? I don't know why they withdrew the order. Was it because someone is concurring or dissenting? And that isn't finalized? Is it because some of the justices changed their minds? There's a lot of mystery here. But I think if this is the final ruling, we still can't say with any certainty that this is a big win for abortion rights. It's simply a postponement of an ultimate conclusion in the case.
So first of all, let me bring in MSNBC medical contributor and former Obama White House policy director, Dr. Kavita Patel. It's good to see you. So put it into the context of the fight over reproductive rights in America and how important this decision will be.
Yeah, Chris, first of all, I completely agree with Mary. It's hard to know what to make out of it, but no matter what, there's so much at stake here, not just emergency treatment, which is what's at hand at this case, and whether doctors can actually help to stabilize a person's health in states like Idaho and across the country, but it's interfering with every aspect of care. Chris, it's causing, even in states like mine, the state of Maryland, where we have enshrined a lot of these reproductive rights, where it's causing many people to just stop and say, oh, do I need to ask permission to do that? Oh, is this something that could be life-threatening, even outside of reproductive services? So it is questioning access to care on a fundamental level. So there's so much at stake, and I don't think people appreciate the ripple effect beyond reproductive services. It's also changing the way we train doctors, Chris. If you're in many of the states, not just Idaho, many states across this country, you don't even have experience in identifying some of these issues with a pregnant woman's life and what you need to do to stabilize her and give her a life-saving treatment. Think about that, Chris. That changes the fabric of healthcare for everyone, not just women.
So what do we know about what the real-world impact has been up until this point, Kavita?
Yeah, well, so here's what we know. We know that the numbers of requests for medication abortions, which are legal, and we did see that come through with the recent Supreme Court decision for allowing mifepristone, which is legal and safe and effective, to continue to be prescribed. Again, states can make that very difficult, but federally that's allowed. So we know that those numbers have increased. We know that the numbers of people who have had to leave states for obtaining reproductive services, that's also, by the way, in the cases of miscarriages, where they're just seeking health care, that they have had to come out of states like Idaho and transfer to other states. And we also know that there has been a higher maternal mortality. So pregnant mothers are dying as a result of this confusion and this kind of political pressure that has been inserted at the hospital level. So I do think that those are facts. That doesn't need to, that's not a political debate. Those are facts about what the state of medicine is on the ground. And we also know that people are not choosing to do their residencies in some of these states with the most restrictive laws. That just means there are fewer providers in those states.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.